Hey, 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 you're watching or perhaps listening to, or perhaps have it on YouTube and are doing the dishes while it's on to Talk Gnosis, the
Maybe you're
internet's
paying
favorite.
attention and maybe you're not.
Maybe you're not. Maybe you're drifting off. Maybe you're putting it on to go to sleep to. We have gotten lots
Maybe
of
it's
feedback.
subliminal influences.
That's right. Exactly. It's going right into your unconscious. But this is the web's premier talk show about Gnosticism, the esoteric, mythology, magic, the occult, hypnotism, Carl Jung, marketing, storytelling,
Weird stuff.
weird stuff,
High
weird
weirdness.
people, cool
Low weirdness.
people. Yes, high, in between, and low weirdness. I'm one of your many hosts, Deacon Jonathan Stewart. Joined with me is our primary number one host, Bishop Lady Peterson. Hello, Bishop.
I'm number one. How are you doing, Deacon?
Pretty good. I'm for our loyal listeners and watchers, they know that I was on a secret mission to the east coast of Canada to find lost tribes of Gnostics. I didn't find any, but now I'm back in Montreal and very excited to be presenting tonight's host. Oh goodness. Okay, everybody, it's been a long, for me, 38 years. You know, and it's starting to weigh on me
It's been a
in this
very
argument.
long 2020.
Oh man, it's still April, right? Talking about it still being April. Our guest is Patrick Patch Drury. We originally had him on. I'm going to raise up the curtain here. Way back, closer to the beginning of this horrible year, 2020. That show was lost, but it happened for a reason. Everything happens for a reason. Sometimes it's bad reasons, but there's always a reason. And Patrick has changed his focus a little bit, but Patrick is a writer, he's a storyteller, he's a hypnotist, he's a marketer, he's a podcaster, he's a cool guy on the internet, he's a former actor, he's so many things. Patch, I'll stop doing the intro for you. Say hi, tell us what you're all about.
Hello. I'm so glad you started this by kind of explaining how the sausage is made and that we recorded an episode that's gone, because I was like, okay, don't mention the first episode. Don't mention the first episode. I was afraid that I would do that and I would ruin the mystique somehow. So
the illusion.
Yeah, I'm glad you got that out of the way.
Yeah.
But my name is Patch Drury. My given name is Patrick Drury. But my first wife, her family used Patch as a nickname for Patrick, and I liked it because it made me sound like a longshoreman or a soldier of fortune. So I kept it. As literally the only thing I kept from my first marriage. I'm a board certified clinical hypnotherapist. As you mentioned, I've been a lot of things before that. As a professional actor for a while, an award-winning columnist. I did a short stint as a cartoonist, and was a story specialist for a while. Still consider myself a story specialist, but I bring that up to say all the things that I've done, all the things that I've been involved with, have all revolved around storytelling, whether it's telling my story or other people's stories.
Yeah. So your content used to be more around this focus on storytelling, and people who are at home and don't know, you're like, what does this have to do with the esoteric? But they're going to find out pretty soon, and also how it connects to hypnosis and everything else.
Yes.
So you have made this pivot. It's actually good that we lost that first show, because we talked a lot about storytelling on that show. We're going to talk about it again, but as you said, you are now a board certified hypnosis. So now you're talking a lot about consciousness. You're talking about the subconsciousness. You're working as a hypnotist. Why this pivot?
Thank you for asking. And what I assume that question is going to come from people who are looking at my feeds and stuff. And the thing I say is, it's not really a pivot. If there's a Venn diagram of storytelling and hypnosis, it's practically a circle. And I say that because when I was the way that I have kind of jumped into storytelling was like what I would call Campbellian storytelling. So Joseph Campbell, which most people have heard that name, he described storytelling on a structure he called the monomyth, which was a big circle, and it was divided right down the middle, divided horizontally. Top half was the known world, the conscious world. Bottom half was the world of adventure, or the subconscious. And he had a line dividing it, which he called a threshold. And I kind of realized, that really is what hypnosis is about. You have your conscious life and your subconscious life, and they're divided by a line. It's not called the threshold. It is a threshold, but it's actually called the critical filter or the critical factor. And so, whereas in the monomyth, in Joseph Campbell talk, what carries you across that threshold is supernatural aid or a mentor or a guide. In hypnosis, what carries you across the threshold of the critical factor is your imagination. And so if you lay the two things over top of each other, they really map to each other like in a really eerily spooky way. And besides that, take Campbell out of it. I spent decades helping people understand what their story is, and considered that very helpful because that was a roadmap. It was handing people a roadmap to their life. But then I realized, what if they don't like where the roadmap goes? What if you don't like how your story ends? And I know of no quicker, more successful, easier way to change the direction of your story than hypnotherapy.
Yeah. Now, bringing this back to connect it more with Joseph Campbell, which you did quite well. But can you take a moment? You mentioned the monomyth. Can you talk about exactly what that is, who Joseph Campbell was, how he influenced your previous life and your present life? I know you touched on that, but we're going to have some people out there who are poking their heads up and being like, wow, I'm really into mythology. I'm really into esotericism. I really love the Joseph Campbell. And there's going to be some people out there being like, who the heck is that? Who's this Joe?
Awesome. Well, this is the conversation I love. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to have it. I started out, not started out, but years ago when I was younger and needed the money, I worked as a pastor at a Christian church. And it was a large church here in Lexington, Kentucky. And because it was a large church, it had a video production department. And that's how you know it was a large church, because small churches rarely have video production departments. So I created videos at this church. And when you're in video production at a church, what that basically means is you've got the big guy who's standing up front every week and he's talking about whatever he's talking about. And your job is to create content to support and go along with what he's talking about. And so I quickly realized, my job every week is to tell stories. And so I did what everyone in my generation does when they want to get good at something, because I decided I need to get better at storytelling. I Googled it. And so I Googled storytelling, and the first name that came up was Dan Harmon. And I'm sure a lot of people listening to this know that name. Dan Harmon created the television show Community and the cartoon Rick and Morty, who's very popular right now. And so he also created something called a story circle. And this story circle was a circle with 8 points on it. And if you line that story circle up with the what happened in your story, you could be guaranteed to tell a technically proficient story. And I say technically proficient because you can tell a technically proficient story about how auto glass is made, or a technically proficient story about kittens trapped in a burning building. One of those is necessarily going to have more emotional impact. So the story circle doesn't necessarily guarantee the emotional impact, but it guarantees technical proficiency. So I started studying this, started applying it to the videos I was creating, and I got really good, I thought, at telling stories. And so the more I studied Dan Harmon's circle, I realized, he didn't create these ideas. He's adapting the work of a man named Joseph Campbell, which Joseph Campbell didn't create these ideas either, but he kind of brought them to popular consciousness. So he had his own story circle, was called the monomyth, whereas Harmon's had 8 points, his had 17 points. So he went deep. So I started applying that to my work. So between Harmon's 8 and Campbell's 17, I got even better at telling stories. The issue came in because Harmon was a TV guy, Campbell not a TV guy. Campbell was a mythologist. He was the world's premier mythologist. And so he kind of studied religions and religious stories and stuff. And you can't really study what he says about stories and mythology without also kind of getting exposed to what he believes about God. And so the more I studied it, eventually I realized, I don't know if I believe everything that I have to believe to work at this church? And so here's, I've come to a realization in the last few months, and it has resulted, this story that I'm telling, I've told a million times. It's resulted in me telling this story a little differently. The way I used to tell the story was, I had this crisis of faith. I went to my bosses. I told them about it. They said, figure it out. You got plenty of time. I didn't figure it out in time. They fired me. That's how I used to tell the story. I have come to some realizations about the way my conscious mind and my subconscious mind work. When I started having this crisis of faith, my subconscious mind started kind of sabotaging me in my job. And it realized, you're not supposed to be here, and you're too much of a chicken shit to quit. So I'm going to sabotage you, and I'm going to make you so bad at this job that they fire you. And so that's what happened. And we've all maybe not heard it called by this name, but Freud talked about parapraxis, which we commonly refer to as a Freudian slip. But Freud would say that happens in all areas of our lives, not just what we say. Our subconscious, our internal life sometimes expresses itself, not just verbally, but in our actions and in our the way we behave. And so I believe, when I stopped believing the stuff I had to believe to work at this church, my subconscious, which knew I shouldn't be there, started conspiring to get me fired. And so I got fired, thankfully. Oh my God, thankfully. And no fault of those guys. This was all me. But I started seeing what I could do with storytelling. And I spent some time using it in marketing. And I spent some time coaching people around discovering what their story was and helping them line their lives up with the monomyth and seeing how it all fit together. And I spent a little bit of time doing that, and I loved it. And it really resonated with my heart. But going into this COVID time, like we all have, I kind of was like, I don't want to just sit and watch Tiger King. I'm not, I don't care about that. I want to do something different. So I started reading, and one of the people I discovered, which some of your audience may have heard of, is Jason Louv. And I took his magic.me course, and I enjoyed it. There's a lot of good stuff there, but what really got me was the concept of the holy guardian angel. This idea that there is a higher, truer self that, and I know Crowley was of two minds of this. Your audience may be of two minds of it. I don't believe it's something outside of me that I need to connect with. I believe it's something inside of me that I need to find a path to. And so I was like, that's what I'm going to spend COVID doing. I'm going to try to connect with what I believe to be my subconscious inner self, this holy guardian angel, this higher self. And so I started doing some ceremonial magic stuff, started meditating, really dove into hypnosis and trying to connect with my inner self. And the night that everything clicked for me, the night that I kind of mark as, okay, this is where this got real. I saw a video on Chevreau's pendulum, which I had never tried before. And so I watched the video, learned how to do it. I have a necklace that's a pendulum. I pulled it off, and I just started asking my subconscious questions. The first thing I did was you have to make sure you know what yes is, what no is. Okay, if the pendulum moves this way, it's yes. If it moves this way, it's no. And so I did that, made sure I knew what yes and no was, and then I just started asking my subconscious questions. And it was answering, and the answers made sense. And so that kind of was like, okay, this is a legitimate thing for me, a path for me to go down. So I went down it and ended up getting my certificate as a clinical hypnotherapist. Started practicing, and I love it. I love, and I if people ask, the basis of my work is storytelling, but it's also helping other people create that rapport between their conscious mind and their subconscious mind. And I think when you help people do that, their life takes a dramatic, super fast turn towards what they want.
Yeah. for everybody at home, if you haven't used a pendulum, it's pretty freaky. It works for most people. You hold it, and it's clockwise for yes, counterclockwise for no, for instance, and it'll usually start spinning. I remember my grandfather showing it to me when I was.
That's me. I'm sorry.
Okay, it's all right.
That's right. That's fine.
Yeah, I can also. Okay, it's done. Okay, I can edit this part. So.
Oh, I kind of like it.
I'm muted. My family's getting home. I'm so sorry.
No, it's all right.
Don't worry.
Oh, you like? Okay. It's authentic. I'm keeping it in.
Earlier. I mean, we love.
Okay, I'm keeping it in. I'm keeping it in. So, people at home, enjoy the dogs. And if you want better editing, contribute to the Patreon. If you already contribute to the Patreon, then we will make your name extra big in the credits. Try the pendulum. It's freaky. It's cool. I remember my grandfather showing it to me when I was like 6. It works for like 99% of people. The other thing I'll say as well, which is not a question, just adding on, but like everybody working on this show, hi Jerome, our producer. I do some copywriting. I call myself a digital professional because I do some online marketing. I've written ads. I've done just about anything that people will pay me to do. If you need somebody murdered, send me the money. I'll do it. Please, anything, I do it. But for Harmon's Story Circle, I found it remarkable for advertisements. For correct, even very simple ones, even simple internet ads, using that to tell the story. I actually use it more in advertising than I do with my fictional writing. So that I can send it to you, Lainey, if you're ever doing as part of your copywriting. Yeah, because it's pretty neat. And exactly. And I'll try to remember to link it in the show notes. Again, donate to the Patreon.
And then we won't have to be copywriters anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I could do proper show notes. Lady, before I continue on, like a train going off the rails, do you have anything to add?
I'm really interested in what Patch is talking about here on a number of levels. One of the things that I've often found very useful for my own self, as well as working in a pastoral capacity with people, is this notion of stories. We tell stories, and the stories may or may not be true. That's one thing that I've found. The other thing that I have found is that many people, including myself at various times, might decide to start believing a story that somebody else is telling us about ourselves. And that story may not only not be true, but that story may be told in a way as a form of false witness in many cases, but also as a way of controlling another person. And I was wondering if you had, and this is, I think, particularly true in abusive relationships, where people are being told a story by somebody. Well, look at you, you failed all these times. You're lucky that I've stuck with you. Or there's different ways of framing a person's experiences, and they're used to control others. And I was wondering, Patch, if you had any insight into that particular process.
What that does. That really combines the two worlds that I'm walking in right now, that storytelling, but also hypnosis, because when somebody gives you a story like that and compels you to believe it, either in an evil manner, like you describe, or in a very innocent manner, it becomes a form of hypnosis. We begin to believe and kind of just walk under the power of that story. And so, just like you described, there are people who are in abusive relationships who do that. I realized when I was a little kid, my parents couldn't have been more leave it to beaverish in their wholesomeness and the way they treated me and loved me, but they would punish me by taking comic books away. And so the story I started to internalize was, the stuff I'm into doesn't contribute to my success. So if I got a bad grade, okay, the comic books are going away. So I'm like, somehow those comic books are standing in the way of me being a good math student. So that was a story I became hypnotized by. So the scary thing is I have an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old. He's about to turn 8. I look at him and I'm like, how am I hypnotizing him right now? Like, what is he learning about punishment and about the way daddy responds to what he's doing. And so we all end up doing that to the people in our lives around us. You asked a specific question. I'm not sure if I got even close.
No, it was really, that was a really good answer, something that I wanted to hear about. And those are perfect examples of how, the stories that we're told by others or the stories that we make up are not always true. And sometimes they're used to control. Sometimes we use them to hypnotize ourselves. Sometimes though, I think that some people were more likely to become attached or to form an attachment to their stories, while others do not. Do you have any insight as to what it is why do some people perhaps externally have, or even within ourselves, why do we hook on or latch on to one story and let the other story pass us by?
Sure. To some degree, anything that we learn or exposed to before age 7 has a greater likelihood of kind of attaching itself to us, because as we're growing up, before 7, our mind is in what's called a theta state. In this theta state, the line between reality and fiction becomes really blurred, and we're in that state because evolution is such that we have to learn to become humans quickly. Horses are born within hours, they're running. Some animals are born within hours, they're hunting. When babies are born, they're pretty useless for a while, So that theta state helps us to become useful quickly. So that's part of it. If you're exposed to it before 7, it's going to be locked in. Another thing, the language of our subconscious, which is with what you're describing, those stories, they have to take a subconscious hold. Consciously, we can look at someone's behavior and say, that's wrong. They shouldn't be doing that. They don't have the right to do that. But it doesn't matter if we do that consciously. Subconsciously, it's got its hold in it. It's got a hold on us. So what causes somebody to take a hold subconsciously is when it speaks the language of the subconscious. And there are 2 ways to do that. Strong emotion. So if something happens, there's a heavy emotional component to it, or metaphors. If we speak to someone metaphorically with stories through their imagination, then we have much more of a likelihood of affecting them. And so listening to that, you're like, well, what does that even mean? If you tell someone a story, that you're going to be able to abuse them more easily. And it's not quite that. Talking about Joseph Campbell and Dan Harmon and their stuff being helpful in marketing, it's helpful in marketing because there's a clear defined start point, conflict, and end point. And if we can convince someone, if you do this, this will happen, and then you'll be this, then that's going to have more likelihood to take a subconscious hold. So if I convince you, if you do this, nobody's going to love you, and I'm going to be all you have left. If you can make that cause and effect really clear and really sink in, then that's really effective and really potentially damaging.
Yeah, I mean, it's just what you're talking about with marketing there. I mean, I know that people love stories. I mean, if you look at some of the best, most compelling ads online, they usually involve a story. And they hold people. It's long form content that will hold a story. I used to, I've worked in retail sales, and I was working in a tea shop. I used to be a well-known tea blogger. And when I would just tell people, this is what I use at home and how I use it, 95% of the time I sold the item. It was just, that was not being, I was just being a salesperson. I was telling the absolute truth, but that did absolutely hook into people and got them to buy. So what you're saying makes makes a great deal of sense.
Yeah, we're built to resonate with that structure.
Yeah. Backing up a little bit for some things that both you and Lainey were saying, sometimes I get, let's call it mild criticism about some of our guests, because it's like, you're supposed to be a Gnosticism show, and the people you talk to, they're not talking about 2nd century Gnosticism. And I always say, Lainey and I are both Gnostics. There's always going to be a Gnostic perspective. But I think our hardcore Gnostics at home, when they're listening to you and Lainey talking about being hypnotized by stories so that you don't know your true self, I mean, that is the Gnostic monomyth right there, right?
Sure,
That,
yeah.
that we are lost in a story that's not ours. We're cut off from our true selves, and we need to break out. And one of the ways that the Gnostics did was through reprogramming through their own myth, a stronger myth, a counter myth, so that you could break out of this hypnotic programming.
100%.
Also, on that topic of going back a little bit and connecting a little bit closer for our occult heads out there, you mentioned the holy guardian angel, and we need to do a show. I might even do a whole panel so people can just fight it out, because something that people love to argue about online is, what is this holy guardian angel? And Patch, you touched on that. Is it a part of you? Is it, I don't want to say simply, but is it your unconscious, an aspect of the unconscious? Is it an archetype? Is it actually something outside of you? People love to have this argument, but we won't have it right now. But you said that you became entranced with this idea of making this connection to your holy guardian angel. Do you feel like you have made that connection, that you've discovered your higher self with the work that you've been doing in some way?
So you have invited me to throw myself on the pyre of the internet by asking that question. But
yes. Are you invited?
One of the things when I'm studying it and I'm reading, one of the things that constantly is said over and over again is, this is an arduous task. With the Abraham magic that you could potentially do to contact it, you have to have a house and facing a certain direction with windows, and it takes 6 months. And then other people are like, no, if you do this from this particular Crowley writing, you can make contact. And there's a lot of different theories about how hard or easy it is. But then you see Crowley, and he says specifically, it really is individual. Like, whether you make contact with it or not, and how you do it is going to be up to you. And so I was like, you know what, I'm gonna hunker down, and I'm gonna make an effort to make contact. And even if I never do, the good it will do for me will outweigh if I were just sitting binging something on TV. So I started the process, and because I'm a hypnotherapist, because I have these tools in my tool belt, after weeks of meditating, I was like, you know what? I'm going to create a audio hypnosis to listen to kind of spur me towards to invoke the holy guardian angel. And so I listened to it. And the big thing they say is, when you encounter your holy guardian angel, you're basically looking for its name. And once you know its name, then you're free to have a knowledge of it, have conversation with it. So I listened to this hypnosis, and then I went to bed that night. And as I was going to bed, I hear what feels to me like a Hebrew word in my head. I'm not saying it out loud because I don't know what the etiquette is. Maybe I'm not supposed to say the name of my holy guardian angel. But I was like, oh, and I heard it in my voice. It wasn't like a voice from outside me. It was like my thought. It just occurred. And I was like, oh, I don't know that word. And so I looked it up. It's actually a Hebrew word. And I was like, well, I wonder if that's it. I wonder if my holy guardian angel just told me its name. And so I just kind of started doing what you do. I started looking for synchronicities. I started looking for moments that felt like I was being guided towards something. And if I would see something, I would say thank you to this name. And then one day I was talking to my wife, who she's very esoteric minded, but our heads work very differently. And so I was kind of telling her about all of it. And I said, I don't know if it's really it, because it shouldn't have been this easy. And she was like, why? And I said, well, because everybody says it's not that easy. And she says, but doesn't everybody also say that your experience is your experience and you can't base it on other people's? And I was like, well, yeah. And she was like, well, I think the question you really have to ask yourself is, why don't you feel worthy of having contacted this part of yourself? And so that question really kind of hit home. So the next few days, I just kind of meditated on saying the name and saying, thank you for finding me worthy of revealing myself to you, revealing yourself to me. And and this is where the argument you mentioned really stands out, because it's like, is it something outside of yourself? Is it an actual angel that you're coming to contact, or is it your subconscious? And maybe it's my evangelical fear built in, but I operate on a very psychological explanation of magic and the occult. Ultimately, I feel like a lot of the stuff that we seek to make contact with, we seek to speak to, is really inside of us. And that fits very comfortably with what I'm doing in hypnosis and how I've thought about story. And so then I end up hearing myself ask, do I think I'm worthy to be the best version of myself? Mm-hmm. And that was an easier question for me. It's like, yeah, I'm worthy. Yeah, I've done some stupid things. I've done some shitty things. I screw up a lot. But yeah, I'm worthy to be the best version of me. And so since then, if we record this tomorrow, you might hear me say, I don't know if it really happened or not. But for now, right now, today, when we're recording this, I feel very confident that I have come into contact with the highest part of myself, and it changes the steps that I take.
Now, you mentioned that you like the psychological model of the occult. Do you see connections between ritual and perhaps self-hypnosis and hypnosis? You mentioned doing some ritual work and take this Magic.me course. So is there any continuity there between ritual work and hypnosis?
Absolutely. The first thing I'll say is I say, and you repeated me correctly, I kind of have the psychological model that I run by, but I also try to be very Robert Anton Wilson about it and try to be aggressively agnostic. So if tomorrow an actual embodied holy guardian angel stands in front of me, I won't be like, oh, well, that's a part of my subconscious mind. But I'm willing to accept, well, you know what? You have to reconfigure your maps because they are not accurate. So let me first of all say that as to ritual and hypnosis, yes, absolutely. I don't talk about this sort of thing with all of my hypnosis clients, but the ones that will let me kind of say, hey, we're about to establish rapport between your conscious mind and your subconscious mind, which is essentially your everyday ego self and your highest possible self. And you can, and I have even played with the model of subconscious mind, conscious mind, super conscious, that giving that higher self its own piece of the map. And so how much of it I talk about depends on the vibe I get from the client and what I know about them. But one of the things that Milton Erickson, who's one of the grandfathers of hypnosis, one of the things he used to do is before he do any hypnosis, he would give people a ritualized activity to perform that kind of reinforced what they were going to be working on in their hypnosis. So I was working with a client a few weeks ago and I said, until we meet, until your actual hypnosis thing, I want you to write down every dream that you have. I want you to keep it just a notebook by your bed. As soon as you have a dream, write it down. And we're going to talk about those before your hypnosis. And so I wanted that to become ritualized for him. The idea of your subconscious is already talking to you. Now we're going to talk to it. But we're not going to just blab whatever. We're going to make sure what you're saying makes sense with what it's saying. And so that's what example Milton Erickson was trying to help somebody stop drinking. So he told them to go to a plant store and sit in front of the cactuses and just study and look at the cactuses. And then he comes back and he's like, well, why'd you have me do that? And he's like, well, isn't it amazing how long these cactuses can go without a drink? Wouldn't you like to be like that cactus? And so just little things to kind of, what is ritual? It's acting out what's happening inside of us in the physical world. So finding ways for the client to do that, it can be very helpful.
So I feel like due to movies and television series and perhaps horror movies and thriller novels, maybe there's a lot of misconceptions about hypnosis. Well, how should the average person understand hypnosis and what it can actually do for them?
So I think this will especially be relevant for your audience. If you've meditated, that's kind of what hypnosis is like. As a matter of fact, if you're driving, listening to this, don't do this. But for John and Lainey, I'll do this real quick. Close your eyes.
Okay.
That's more or less what it feels like. It's just relaxation and focus. Lainey, you can open your eyes now. Okay, she's gone. She's
gone. Don't make her cluck like a chicken.
What? But hypnosis is just relaxation and focus. And all I do as a hypnotherapist is I guide the person to a relaxed, focused state where we can bypass their critical factor. And we do that with techniques like storytelling, with confusion sometimes. There are different things you can do to kind of make the person's mind go in its own direction while I talk to the subconscious. But, you're talking about TV and how it creates an image that we all have in our head. Another thing that does that is stage shows. Like, at a comedy club, you go and there's a comedian who's going to hypnotize everybody. And the thing that we talk about, and I talked about in my training, was the people who get on stage to be hypnotized are usually the people that, if you're at a party, they're going to have a lampshade on their head. They're going to be having a good time. And so they want to be the life of the party. They want to be the center of attention. So that's not to say nothing's happening or they're just playing along, but hypnosis is all about suggestion. And some people you can suggest to slap your ass every time I touch my head, and they're all for it. And some people are less open to that suggestion. And so that's why when at a comedy show, you'll see the hypnotist tell some people, hey, you know what? You'll enjoy the show more from the audience. Why don't you go sit down?
Right. Now, so hypnosis, it's not mind control. It's almost interactive storytelling with the unconscious.
That's how I do it. It's absolutely not mind control. There is not a thing I could tell you to do in hypnosis. And a big thing, this used to, before I get into hypnosis, this really bothered me. If you watch a hypnosis video on YouTube and a guy says, close your eyes, and then he goes for a little bit, and then he's like, you're not going to be able to open them. I could always open my eyes. And I'm always like, well, this doesn't work. If a hypnotist on YouTube can actually physically make your eyes weld shut and not open, that guy has some kind of strange magical power going on. When it's successful, he has just suggested to you that you can't open your eyes, and you're like, okay, I'll go with that suggestion. So yeah, it's not mind control. It's more. I've already mentioned Robert Ansel Wilson. He used to, in his talks, he would do what he called guided meditation. So he'd have everybody close their eyes and he'd have them imagine something, and he'd talk them through it. And he realized later, he's like, I was hypnotizing people, but I wasn't comfortable saying that's what I was doing. But that's 100% what it was. We all go in and out of hypnosis all day. I can, watching you guys, if somebody's listening on just audio, they're not picking up on this. I can watch you guys. And the same for me with you guys. We have all three gone in and out of hypnosis throughout this podcast. It's light. It's not a deep trance by any means, but their light hypnosis has been happening this whole time.
In your bio, you refer to yourself as a quote-unquote toolbox mystic and a quote-unquote hillbilly bodhisattva. What did both of these titles mean to you?
So toolbox mystic. I realize, and this is by no means unusual. When you get into mysticism and you start looking at stuff, all of the traditions kind of map to each other very easily. And so it's really easy to jump from a little bit of Buddhism to Gnosticism to Hermeticism to Campbellian storytelling to hypnosis. They all they're all kind of pointing in the same direction. And so because of that, I've come to the conclusion that it's not a good idea to throw any of it away. If you have a toolbox, keep it all in your toolbox. Mitch Horowitz, who I'm a big fan of, he's been on the show actually. He describes it as radically ecumenical. And I love that terminology, the idea that you don't have to pick one flavor, because there's all these flavors, and if something is useful, by all means use it. And so that's what I mean by Toolbox Mystic. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Hillbilly Bhodisatva. I live in Kentucky. I live in the central part of the state, pretty far from what those of us in the state would think of as a hillbilly, but outside of in Canada, you may think of the entirety of the state as hillbilly-ish.
I'm from Chicago. Yeah.
Oh, you're from Chicago. That's right. So
I'm in Chicago. Yeah. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what's your in the States? What's your impression of Kentucky?
Kind of what you just said, which of course I know is not, entirely true. I've been to Kentucky, certainly. But yes, this is how we are in Chicago. I can't speak for the rest of Illinois. Illinois is a very long state. In fact, I think we border with Kentucky when you get far down there, but we Chicagoans are our own breed of cat.
Gotcha. Well, that was very insulting, first of all.
Terribly insulting. No, actually, it's one of those things. Talking about being hypnosis, the kind of things that we tell, the stories we tell.
Absolutely.
That's one of our major problems in the U.S., particularly when it comes to urban-rural divide, but also the fact that states with thriving urban areas are still shuttled off into one area by those of us who, say, for example, maybe up north or in the middle of the U.S. and are in urban areas. So this is actually the kind of thing that I think has been part of the mass hypnosis that's happened in the United States, leading to a lot of the conflict that we're having. But now I'm preaching.
100%. So hillbilly, just in reference to the way some people may think of Kentucky, but Bodhisattva, a term that I discovered, oddly enough, not through Buddhism, but through Joseph Campbell, this idea that there's a point on the monomyth, the refusal of the return, where you've defeated the dragon, you've atoned with the Father, you have the treasure that you've gone in search of, and now your job is to take it back to the village so that you can heal everybody. But there's always a temptation. Well, what if I don't? What if I just kind of stay here and enjoy it for myself, and I don't go back to the village because those guys sucked anyway. They never accepted me. But he says the real job of a hero is to be the bodhisattva, is to return to the village with the elixir, to heal as many people as you can. So in Buddhism, the idea that you're just about to attain enlightenment, but then you turn around and you see all the other enlightened people and you're like, well, I'll put it off until they can join me. And so that's been one of the things that I've decided I want to define myself by, that I don't ever want to, whatever form of enlightenment I attain, if I do have contact with the holy guardian angel, I don't want to just sit there. I want to turn around and say, you guys can have it too. Let's have it together.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, in many esoteric traditions, that is actually a responsibility that, you are expected to, as you progress, bring along other people with you, or to help to bring other people along with you. You can't really drag somebody into that, but you can help to bring them up. I've been involved on and off with the Gurdjieff work for many years, and that's actually a real cornerstone of the Gurdjieff work, is that once you achieve a certain level of awakening, or you've woken yourself from sleep, you are expected to lighten the burden of our common Father by helping to relieve that burden by working with others and waking them up as well.
So you can tell me if we should talk about this afterwards. But in this process, during COVID process, Gurdjieff is one of the things that I've been kind of looking into and dabbling with.
Sure.
What would you recommend as if you're a novice and you're wanting to get into Gurdjieff? What do you recommend?
Well, that's a concept, a question that comes up a lot. All right, I'm going to say.
Is that okay to do this here? We can do that after. Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
And so, generally speaking, the usual response that most people are going to have is they're going to suggest reading Ouspensky's In Search of the Miraculous, which Ouspensky was one of Gurdjieff's early students, although he parted ways with Gurdjieff relatively early on. And then the book that I always recommend to people from the very beginning, I always say, read The Psychology of Man's Possible Evolution. These are 3 lectures that Ouspensky gave. They are brilliant, they are well written, and they really kind of point to the issue, or to the critical issues of what Gurdjieff was after. Now, if you talk to some people who are anti-Ouspensky, and there's a big anti-Ouspensky faction within the Gurdjieff community, they will tell you go right for the source. Read Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson, because they will say to you, first of all, that Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson was the culmination of Gurdjieff's teaching after he abandoned his early methods, and that he intended it to be the source of his teaching going forward, because he did not feel that any of his students had evolved enough to properly teach what he was trying to teach. So he created what he called a legomenism, and this very, very long, thick tome written with, run-on sentences and all kinds of new words, that book was going to help to awaken people and make people who could not be his personal students aware of what he was trying to get at, and hopefully wake them up.
Okay.
So what I put to you is this: for many of us, it's the beginning with the Ouspensky books, because of the way they were done, the way they were written. He was a journalist, so he knew what he was doing. Powerful stuff. But I will also tell you that is a controversial recommendation. And many people would say, just start reading Beelzebub and read it in the way he told you to read it. Just read it first time through as a regular book. Second time through, reading it as if to another person. Many people believe that means reading it out loud. And then the third time you read it through, you try to fathom the gist of what he was saying. I leave those decisions to you.
Okay. I asked, we've already mentioned Mitch Horowitz. I asked him what Gurdjieff book he would recommend. And I believe he said it was an Ouspensky book, but I believe it was the first one you mentioned. I'd have to go back and look. But so now if that's true, that's 2 recommendations. Yeah. I feel like that's where I should go.
I'd be delighted to talk with you. If you want to get in touch on Facebook or something, we can do that. Okay. I'd be happy to talk more.
Yeah, I'm feeling very selfish right now. I'm just I've taken over.
No, this is great.
We're having a talk.
Yeah, this is what people want to hear, right? This is authentic, and you have this interest, and there's going to be listeners out there who are also wanting to know the answer to that question. I will say personally, I quite enjoyed the Ouspensky book. I found it easy to read, approachable, and I've looked at terror. Beelzebub's Tales. Someday, Bishop, I will read it. I've tried. I've stared at it. But it has defeated me. Someday I will come back.
We need to remember that Mr. Gurdjieff was a hypnotist. And he was known particularly for his treatment of alcoholics and drug addicts. That was his primary area. But when he began his teaching period, taking on students, his teaching period, he renounced hypnotism. Although in Beelzebub, he talks about Mr. Beelzebub, the main character, having a career as a hypnotist, a hypnotherapist. So again, I put that to you, and I leave you to decide what you want to do with it.
What's interesting about that is, and I'm like you, John. I've looked at the book and I'm like, oh, and I've heard people describe it as very dense and not in a language that's easy to comprehend immediately. And there are books written in hypnotic language. Energized Hypnosis. Hyatt. Can't think of his first name right now.
Christopher?
But yes, Christopher Hyatt. If you read that book, he tells you at the very onset, like, this book is not, like, grammatically, you're going to have problems with it in certain points. But that's that Milton Erickson tactic of confusion. And so just because your conscious mind trips on it, that doesn't preclude your subconscious mind from diving in and getting something. So if Gurdjieff was well versed in that art, then that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it does. And one of the things to keep in mind is many of his students were some of the best editors and writers of that era. They were modernist writers and editors. And he had them working on the book with him. And at one point, he finally said, okay, we're sending it off to the publisher. And they said, wait a minute, no, it's not right yet. We don't have, we have sentence, we have grammatical problems. We have all kinds of things. And he just said, no, it goes off now.
Okay.
And so I'm just leaving that you mentioned that, right, with Christopher Hyatt's book. So there you go.
Okay. Well, we are in the home stretch. We've crossed the abyss.
We've had a lot of conversations. Yeah. We've been telling stories and hypnotizing each other and.
Yeah, exactly. And getting enlightened, contacting our HCAs, learning about the Gurdjieff work. We covered it all. So
this has been very dense material-wise, I feel like.
I feel like it is.
Patch, one thing. Are you familiar with James Hillman's The Soul's Code?
Love it.
I would like to talk with you. Maybe we'll do another show on that sometime if you're interested in coming back. I would. Yeah, it's a very influential book, and I'd love to hear your perspectives.
When I started this journey, before I got to HGA, I was very kind of enraptured with the idea of a daemon and egregores and that sort of thing. And that's, Hillman doesn't come right out. Oh, he does say daemon sometimes.
He says daemon,
yeah.
But you never quite get the sense that he's like on board. Like it feels very metaphorical. But I was kind of looking for, all right, is this a thing? Does it live inside me? Does it live outside me? And I found that book extremely helpful and really fascinating.
We need to get that show scheduled, Deacon Jonathan.
I'm on it.
I'll go reread to brush up.
So
okay, amazing. Yeah, well, I'll read it too. So shamefully, I've never read it. I had a roommate who was just absolutely obsessed with it, and it's been on my list for a long time. So, we do have to say goodbye, unfortunately. Yeah, well, I wouldn't mind going all night long, to be honest. So that'll be the next show. Yeah. So, Patch, where can people find you if they want to be hypnotized by you, if they want your advice, if they want to interact?
All of my social media is Patch Drury, PATCHDRURY. So you can go there. I also have a website, patchdrury.net. But it is very much right now just an online business card. But the one thing I will point out, if you go to there right now, I'm not sure when this will be played, but on October 1st, I'm beginning a 2-week hypnosis challenge. You call it challenge because that's the word they use. But basically for 2 weeks, I send you at the beginning of each week a hypnosis audio, and you just listen to it as you're going to bed every night for 7 nights. First one's on moving towards whatever you consider success in your life. Second one's on accessing your creativity. And so those are board certified hypnotists designed to work while you're sleeping. And if you go there, there'll be a pop-up as soon as you get there to patchdrury.net. You can put in your name and address or email address, and you will join the challenge, and you can be a part of it.
Amazing. So, if you love this content as much as we did, we love talking to Patch. We honestly would go all night long if it was possible. But we do have to pay our awesome studio, 99 Perspectives, the best digital studio in the world. And as you heard, we are writers. We are not rolling in it. So just to break even, we do need your support. Please go to patreon.com/Gnostic if you haven't already. And you can pitch in a little as $1 per piece of content per month. What you get in return is all the shows early, up to a week early. You can get them live. You get your names in the credits. I am trying to think of more things to give people. We don't want to put anything behind a paywall because we want to spread the light of Gnosis. So you can holler at me if there's something we could do for you in return for your Patreon money. I'll give you my phone number. You can call me anytime. If you cannot support us financially, I know that these are hard times. I've been there myself. I'm often there myself. Please like and subscribe. Share us on social media. Take the show and email it to somebody that you think would like it. So we appreciate your support. We appreciate you listening to this. And that's it, folks. We will be back again. And this is Deacon Jonathan Stewart signing off.
Bishop Lainey Peterson signing off.
Thank you guys so much.
Good night. We love you. We're your best friends. Parasociability. Always.
Very much.